Bill Gates built a software empire so powerful that for 30 years, 9 out of every 10 computers on this planet ran Windows. Banks ran on it. Hospitals ran on it. Governments ran on it. That dominance felt untouchable, like gravity. Then Linux Mint showed up and did what nobody thought was possible. In just 6 months, it exploded from 4 million users to 87 million active installations. That is 600,000 people per day walking away from Windows. Not slowly. Not gradually. Every single day. And Microsoft still has no answer. Let's talk about what actually happened because the numbers here are violent. In January 2024, Linux had 3.1% global desktop market share. By February 2026, that number hit 31.4%. Windows collapsed from 82.3% down to 54.7% in just 24 months. That is a 27.6 percentage point freefall, the fastest platform collapse in computing history. To put that in perspective, during Windows' peak growth in the 1990s, it gained 3 to 4 percentage points per year. Linux just gained 28 percentage points in 2 years. That is not evolution. That is a revolution. And the weapon that made it happen was Linux Mint. Here is why Mint specifically went nuclear when every other Linux distribution stayed quiet. Linux Mint looks and feels exactly like Windows 7, the last version of Windows that people genuinely love. Windows 7 had a 67% user satisfaction rating. Windows 10 dropped to 41%. Windows 11 today sits at a humiliating 28%. For over a decade, users begged Microsoft to bring back the clean, familiar desktop. Taskbar on the bottom, start menu bottom left, system tray bottom right. Microsoft ignored them. Linux Mint's Cinnamon desktop just delivered it. No compromises. No forced changes. Place a screenshot of Windows 7 next to Linux Mint and most people genuinely cannot tell the difference. That single decision drove 18.3 million downloads in February 2026 alone. Ubuntu, the biggest Linux distribution on the planet, managed 17.3 million downloads across all of 2025. Mint beat that in 1 month. Now here is where Microsoft truly lost the plot. Windows 11 did not just fail, it actively destroyed user trust in ways that feel almost deliberate. First came Recall, Microsoft's AI feature that took screenshots of everything you do on your computer every few seconds. Bank passwords, medical records, private messages, all captured, all stored. And when security researchers dug into it, the database was not even properly encrypted. A single Reddit post about it got 89,000 upvotes with users saying they were completely done with Windows. Microsoft pulled it before launch, but the damage was permanent. People saw exactly what Microsoft wanted to build inside their operating system. Then came the ads. Windows 11, an operating system you already paid for through your hardware cost, started showing advertisements in the Start menu, in File Explorer, in Settings, on the lock screen. Microsoft called them suggestions. They are ads. One graphic designer paid $4,200 for a high-end workstation, opened File Explorer to find client files, and got hit with a Microsoft 365 ad while on deadline. She is now saving for a Mac and never touching Windows again. Then Microsoft forced mandatory Microsoft accounts just to set up your own computer. One father spent 3 hours hunting workarounds so his 14-year-old daughter's schoolwork would not sync to Microsoft's cloud. Microsoft patched the workaround weeks later. He returned the laptop. Done. And performance? Windows 11 was marketed as faster and more optimized. Independent testing by Tom's Hardware and PC Gamer showed it performing worse than Windows 10 on identical hardware. One video editor in Los Angeles found his Adobe Premiere render times jumped from 40 minutes to 47 minutes after upgrading, a 17.5% slowdown on the same machine. He reinstalled Windows 10. Gamers reported 15 to 20 FPS drops in Valorant after upgrading. Forums filled up overnight with downgrade guides. 2.7 million users actively downgraded from Windows 11 back to Windows 10 in December 2025 alone, knowing full well Windows 10 lost support on October 14, 2025. They would rather face security risks than use Windows 11. That is not a product problem. That is a revolt. The hardware manufacturers saw all of this and made their move. Lenovo, the world's #1 PC manufacturer with roughly 23 to 24% of the entire global PC market, started shipping 100% of their consumer laptops with Linux pre-installed. Dell followed with 80% Linux across their lineup. HP at 80%. Asus at 92%. Combined, 90% of all new computers shipping today come with Linux out of the box. Walk into a Best Buy right now, 78% of the display floor space is Linux laptop. Windows machines are in the back corner. Walmart eliminated Windows from physical stores entirely. For the average person walking in to buy a computer, Linux is the only option on the shelf. That is how markets permanently shift. The enterprise world shocked everyone too. Deutsche Bank completed migration of 32,000 employee desktops to Ubuntu in January 2026, the largest financial services Linux deployment ever. Their IT support tickets dropped 73%. They are saving $47 million annually. France announced migration of 420,000 government computers. Germany moving 280,000 federal computers. China mandated 234 million government and state-owned enterprise computers switch to Linux-based systems by government order. And the people who already switched? Canonical surveyed 250,000 recent Windows to Linux switchers and asked one question: would you return to Windows if given a free license? 97% said no. Once people experience a computer that boots in 12 seconds instead of 45, uses half the RAM, never forces a restart, shows 0 ads, and does not screenshot their bank password, Windows becomes genuinely unacceptable. Microsoft thought users were trapped. Turns out the trap was an illusion. And once people found the door, they did not just leave. They burned the bridge completely behind them. The Windows era is not ending. It already ended.
We are evolving the OS. Windows is now your canvas for AI and agents. We're innovating in 3 key ways. First, bringing AI and agents into your flow and making it more intuitive to use. And second, making Microsoft 365 Copilot more contextually helpful on Windows. And third, making Copilot Plus PCs even more powerful with enhanced AI.
Bill Gates built Windows from nothing. He turned it into the operating system that runs 1.4 billion computers on this planet. And right now, in 2025, he is reportedly watching that same operating system collapse in real time, and the people responsible are the ones he handed the keys to. This is not a story about a software update. This is a story about how one of the most dominant products in tech history became the most hated, and what happened when the founder finally had enough. Let's start with the numbers because they are brutal. Windows 11 launched in October 2021. Microsoft projected it would hit 50% adoption among Windows users by the end of 2025. The actual number as of November 2025? 29%. They missed their own target by 26 percentage points. Meanwhile, 400 million people are still running Windows 10, an operating system that officially lost security support on October 14, 2025. That means almost 500 million people would rather risk running unpatched software than switch to the new version. That is not a rollout problem. That is a rejection. So why do people hate Windows 11 this much? It starts with the hardware requirements. To install Windows 11, your PC needs a TPM 2.0 chip, a trusted platform module that stores encryption keys. That chip only became standard in computers built after 2016. Microsoft's own internal data showed that more than 50% of Windows 10 devices could not meet the requirement. So overnight, hundreds of millions of completely functional computers were declared obsolete. Not broken, not slow, just officially unsupported because they lacked one small chip. People with 2018 machines with 32 gigabytes of RAM and fast processors were told to buy new hardware. Millions of them said no, and switched to Linux instead. Then Microsoft removed the ability to set up Windows 11 Home without a Microsoft account. You cannot skip it. You cannot go offline. You must hand over your email and connect to the internet just to use your own computer. Every workaround users found, Microsoft patched it out. They have been playing cat and mouse with their own customers, actively closing every door that leads to privacy. And once you are logged in, the entire system is engineered to push you toward OneDrive, toward Microsoft 365 at $100 a year, toward Edge browser and Bing search. The operating system stopped being a tool. It became a sales funnel. And then came Copilot. Microsoft invested $13 billion into OpenAI and decided every single user needed to feel that investment. AI was pushed into Word, Excel, Outlook, and the operating system itself. But the feature that broke everything was called Recall. It took a screenshot of your entire screen every few seconds, stored everything locally, and let you search your history using natural language. Sounds useful. Security researcher Kevin Beaumont tore it apart and found the stored data was not properly encrypted, meaning any malware with local access could read your banking details, your passwords, your private messages. Everything. The backlash was so loud that Microsoft pulled the feature before it even fully launched. They eventually brought it back as opt-in, but the damage was done. You cannot rebuild trust after you have already shown people what you were planning. The revolt did not stay online. It went global. South Korea's government issued a directive to migrate all 1.2 million government computers off Windows entirely, citing data sovereignty concerns after testing found Windows 11 sending thousands of encrypted data packets daily to Microsoft servers. Microsoft sent executives to Seoul and offered a 40% discount on licensing. South Korea had already moved on, spending $340 million building their own Linux distribution. In Brazil, the government announced a plan to migrate 3.1 million government computers to a domestically developed Linux system over 4 years. In Europe, the European Commission opened a GDPR investigation with potential fines reaching 4% of Microsoft's global revenue, which at current size would be over $10 billion. And HP, the world's second-largest PC manufacturer, announced that 40% of their consumer laptops would ship with Linux as the default operating system, with Windows available only as a paid upgrade. That is the context for what reportedly happened inside Microsoft's boardroom. Bill Gates, who has not held an executive role at Microsoft since 2008, was pulled into emergency meetings. According to sources close to those discussions, Gates did not come in calm. He reportedly told the board that Microsoft had built Windows to empower people, to give users control over their own machines, and that leadership had turned it into a surveillance platform that serves Microsoft instead of users. He reportedly said the situation was catastrophic and that they had maybe 12 months to reverse course before the damage became permanent. He reportedly pushed for a complete reset, admit Windows 11 failed, kill the subscription tier plans, make AI optional, bring back local accounts, and drop the hardware requirement. The executives pushed back. CEO Satya Nadella's cloud strategy is working. Microsoft reported $252 billion in revenue for fiscal year 2025, with over 55% coming from cloud services. No consensus was reached. Here is what makes this dangerous for Microsoft long-term. Stack Overflow's 2025 developer survey showed that Windows has fallen to third place among professional developers, behind Mac OS at 36.8% and barely ahead of Linux at 29.1%. Developers build tomorrow's software. When they stop using Windows, they stop optimizing for Windows. Apps launch on Mac first. Windows versions get delayed or never arrive. The platform quietly dies from the inside. That is exactly what happened to BlackBerry. It is what happened to Windows Phone. And it is what is beginning to happen to Windows right now. The question is whether Microsoft will listen to its founder, or whether they will keep chasing cloud revenue until there is no platform left to monetize.
Google drops Gemini 3 and the whole world is seeing them for who they really are, the best positioned company to win artificial intelligence.
OpenAI just sent an internal memo to its entire staff warning them of tough times ahead. Not because of a data breach, not because of a lawsuit, because Google dropped Gemini 3 and the entire AI industry felt it overnight. Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, wrote in that memo that Google has been doing excellent work, that they have some catching up to do, and that they need to stay focused through short-term competitive pressure. Read that again. The company that built ChatGPT just told its own employees it needs to catch up. For 3 straight years, every startup, every tech giant, and every research lab on the planet was chasing OpenAI. That story is now dead. Just 18 months ago, analysts were publicly calling for Sundar Pichai to step down as Google's CEO. The narrative was brutal. Google invented the transformer architecture, the actual engineering foundation that makes ChatGPT, Claude, and every major AI model run, and then watched other companies race ahead and commercialize it first. Back in 2017, a team of Google researchers published a paper called Attention is All You Need. That single paper gave the world the transformer. And for years, Google got almost no credit for it. Now with Gemini 3, that changes completely. Let's talk about what Gemini 3 actually scored, because the numbers are not incremental. On the LM Arena Global Leaderboard, Gemini 3 Pro sits at the very top with an yellow score of 1,501, meaning in direct head-to-head comparisons against every other AI model, it wins more often than not. On Humanity's last exam, which is designed to test PhD-level reasoning, most models struggle to crack 20%. Gemini 3 scored 37.5% without any external tools and pushed that to 41% with its Deep Think mode. That beats GPT 5.1 and every other model on the same test. On Math Arena Apex, the previous top models were stuck below 2%. Gemini 3 hit 23.4%, solving competition-level math problems no other AI could touch before. But here is the number that made the entire industry stop. On ScreenSpot Pro, which tests how well an AI can understand and interact with computer screens and interfaces, Gemini 3 scored 72.7%. OpenAI's GPT 5.1 scored 3.5% on the exact same test. That is not a typo. That gap is not a small competitive edge. That is a completely different league. And the reason it matters is because that benchmark directly measures how capable an AI agent is at using software autonomously, which is exactly where the next wave of AI money is going. On Live Codebench, Gemini 3 holds an yellow rating of 2,439 versus GPT 5.1's 2,243, and internal tests at GitHub found it solved 35% more coding challenges than even Gemini 2.5 did. Real users running side-by-side tests confirmed the same pattern. Both Gemini 3 and ChatGPT were given a pure logic puzzle using a 7-minute hourglass and an 11-minute hourglass to measure exactly 15 minutes. ChatGPT produced a technically correct answer. Gemini 3 produced the optimal solution with cleaner reasoning and fewer steps. Then came an infographic generation test. ChatGPT described the infographic, needed a second prompt to actually generate it, and the result came out cluttered. Gemini 3 delivered a clean, well-structured infographic on the very first prompt. Faster, sharper, and no back and forth required. The real-world results are just as impressive. Rakuten tested Gemini 3 and found it could accurately transcribe a 3-hour multilingual meeting with overlapping voices while simultaneously extracting structured data from blurry document photos, beating their previous solution by over 50%. Google's DeepThink model, which sits underneath Gemini 3, flagged an error inside a published peer-reviewed mathematics paper. The researchers went back and checked. The model was right. This is not an AI helping you write emails. This is an AI catching mistakes that trained human experts missed. Now here is where the story goes deeper than just a better chatbot. Gemini 3 was trained exclusively on Google's own chips called Tensor Processing Units, or TPUs. While every other AI company on Earth is competing for the same limited pool of NVIDIA GPU supply, Google trains its most powerful models on hardware it controls completely. That is a structural cost and speed advantage that grows over time. Google just announced plans to double TPU production by 2028, and they have already cut a deal to sell 1 million TPUs to Anthropic directly, with rumors swirling that Meta and OpenAI may be next. Those are NVIDIA's biggest customers. Google is not just competing with NVIDIA now. It is actively breaking their monopoly, which is exactly why their stock charts have been moving in completely opposite directions. And then there is the distribution advantage, which is the part most people completely underestimate. OpenAI has to convince people to change their habits, download new apps, and build new routines around its product. Google does not have to convince anyone of anything. It already owns search,